You are listening to Bits of Signum Creator Stories podcast. I'm your host, Angela Dalton, CEO and founder of Signum Growth. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bits of Signum Creator Stories. Today, I am so excited to welcome Dr. Songyee Yoon, who served as President and Chief Strategy Officer of NCSoft. She's the founder of its AI Center. She spent more than 2 decades in AI. She completed her PhD in computational neuroscience at MIT in the year 2000, so really one of the first. She currently serves also on the board of MIT and as a visiting professor. So she is steeped in knowledge in AI, and her technical and traditional gaming background might fool you because this book is very, very different from any other book about gaming that I've ever read. So the book that we're going to be talking about today that she wrote is called Push Play, Gaming for a Better World. And anybody who can see the video can see that I have been, here we go. Here's the book. I have been doing old school annotating and making notes and putting little post-its in this book. It's a very different look at gaming. So we're really excited to speak to you today about it. Dr. Yoon, thank you so much for coming and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. So just on that topic of the way you're thinking about gaming, especially as another mom, and we're both moms. I think one of your children is the same age as one of mine, 12 and 13, I think. It really resonated with me. Then I have much older children as well, but I've always had this gut instinct, even though it's been a little bit unpopular, that gaming has truly positive developmental impacts on kids. And this is a very kind of different view, especially from somebody who has a traditional gaming background. And I was excited to see this idea unfold very early in the book. So would love to dig into this idea of gaming as a way to experiment and learn. And you also said, I loved this quote where you said, we play to create new worlds so that we can change this one. And then later there was a quote, there is a link between gaming and curiosity. Our curiosity is what makes us human. So I would just love for you to dive into, this bigger picture concept in the book and maybe what prompted you to write it.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a thorough introduction to the book. I think it's if you think about, I'll just start with saying that anything excessive is not good, right? I mean, whether it's there's gaming, whether it's like consumption of certain type of food or like anything, if you do it too excessively to kind of break the balance of your life, then I don't think that's something to be encouraged. So I think I can't go into the assumption that we have a kind of balanced, we have a kind of way of doing it in a balanced way and spend appropriate amount of time on play and other things, etc. And I think if you think about gaming and it's extension of, broadly it's extension of play, and play has been always a very integral part of human evolution and any type of evolution. And I think I opened the book, I start the book talking about my experience and observation in Galapagos. If you think about like polar bears, animals, and sea lions, they're like a babies. They don't kind of enter the world knowing how to hunt or how to go out and interact with other potential intruders. But if you look at, they play it as an animal, as kind of the baby animals. They spend the whole day playing with their siblings, and like in a very simulated way, they play as if it's a real hunting incident, where it's a real the defense incident. And they sometimes they really kind of bleed, and because they kind of focus in this so intensively. And I think that all of it is a play, but that's how they learn it. It's a simulated learning environment, and that's how they learn. And I think play has played a similar yeah, similar role in human evolution too, right? If you think about like our olden days when there is some kind of artifact, some new type of material, we don't know like as humanity what to do with like first found bronze, like, but we start with playing with it. We just kind of make some kind of cool artifacts. We kind of play and we try different things and we figure out. But sometimes we stumble upon it. Sometimes we just kind of go through with certain hypotheses, but we end up finding some useful utility that's good for us. And that doesn't just only apply to some kind of physical materials. It applies to kind of human interactions. You kind of try out, and through that you learn like, oh, this is probably what I shouldn't do. This is probably what I shouldn't say, or this is where I shouldn't go, or like this is encouraged and I should do more of this. And this is such an integral part of like learning and evolution. And the computers and digital and internet happen to be the most novel artifact of our time, and we are trying to figure out what to do with it, and create a lot of simulated world and play within that environment, very low risk environment, and figure out like that could be how we interact with others. That could be how to make friends with like people across the continent, or it could be how we can use some kind of new technology, new novel effect in a way that's really engaging and fascinating to us, and oftentimes that lead to inventions that's useful in other industries too. So I think such a strong engine of innovation and learning and human progression, and I think that's where I wanted to find the value of gaming.
It's so interesting to hear, even with baby animals, that it's just that innately natural, the concept of play. And you often hear parents complaining about video games being a waste of time. And it's you use the word shameful and unproductive in the book, and I definitely feel that. I mean, it's not even controversial to throw some negative comment out at a cocktail party about your kids and how much they game and how terrible it is. And you even pointed out there are elected officials in our country who have claimed that it teaches people how to kill. And a lot of parents will say, go outside and play. Why can't you just go outside and play? And I've always found that statement interesting because they don't even have the basic awareness that they already are playing by playing video games. Like, do they want them to get fresh air and play? But I do wonder, like, why this exists with parents and their complete aversion to playing video games.
Oh, I mean, I think it's I think there is a very famous quote from like I don't know how many hundred years ago that people are complaining that, oh, like kids of today, we're very concerned about kids today because they're spending so much time reading books. I think that was
I didn't hear
I don't hear that much these days. I think it's we tend to be worried about our next generation because but at the same time, they're gonna live in a world that's completely different from like when we were growing up, and I think it's really hard. I don't try to like. I mean, I think we have a tendency like a pre in the interest of like kind of looking after the best interest of our children, we're trying to really get rid of any hurdles and like design the life so that they can thrive and flourish with kind of uh, minimum just kind of like a pain or whatever. But at the same time, it's work. I mean, I think I mean, we have to be careful about that because the world is different. The world they're going to living in and the type of obstacles they're going to be faced with is going to be very different. So instead of just kind of removing the obstacles, it's very important for them to help them to equip with the right type of muscle that they can navigate themselves and be very adaptive and kind of problem solving for themselves, etc. So I mean, so I think it's a that's kind of we kind of over worry about kids doing things very different from what we did when we were growing up, even if it's inevitable. And at the
Mm.
same time, I agree that as I started out, I mean, anything excessive is not good for you. So like, it's
Mm.
really important to have a good balance of like mental activities and and concentration in certain things, and also physical activities. I mean, you don't want to be
Right.
sitting at the table at desk for like many hours without like walking around or without getting fresh air, etc. So I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's there. So I think it's not just gaming is bad. Anything that makes you sit at a desk for like 3 4 hours, I mean that's gonna be not healthy. So I
Right.
think that there is certainly there is some kind of balance that has to be brought
Mm.
into.
Yeah, when I was quoting the book to Serafina, my 12-year-old, and she said, "Great, does she mean that I can play games all day?" And I said, "No, she says in the book this doesn't mean unlimited screen time. She also limits screen time."
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been struggling with this concept of education for many years in terms of how to come up with ideas to integrate it or to take this kind of taint off of gaming. And you came up with a really compelling idea called Projectory. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It was, I think, founded by a nonprofit that was sponsored by NCSoft, and you call it a third space. Can you talk about
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, certainly. So I think one of the epiphany that I had was that so we had a corporate nursery to support parents, working parents at NCSoft,
Hmm.
and we designed that the nursery to really help the child development. So, like for example, we designed the whole environment based on our what we know from kind of brain science to maximize their stimulation in terms of spatial intelligence development and other sensory stimulation. But by the time they had to graduate from nursery and they went on to the public schools. What figured out was that they have some like difficulty adapting adjusting to the public school curriculum and the system, and realized while we talk a lot about like future of work and what AI is going to do in that world and like what's the role of humans, etc., it's the our education system has been developed and optimized over the last 200 300 years in delivering knowledge, and the knowledge is almost becoming commodity. Like it's so it's at your fingertip. You can kind of search up certain information, and you can kind of validate whether the information is up to date. What is the kind of the evidence or fact behind that supporting that, etc. Whereas something like creativity and something like a critical thinking, problem solving are the one kind of the skills that we humans will need, will be very important in the world we're going to coexist with this AI, like whether it's like kind of some kind of robot, some kind of automated systems, and part of the business run by automated solutions, etc. But to kind of remain productive and coexist, those skills are that I mentioned earlier are going to be so important and critical. But we haven't done much in evolving our classroom and education system to really maximize the training kids for like and kind of maximize their creativity potentials.
Hmm.
So we did some research on like to start with like whether creativity is something that we can nurture through some kind of environment experiment and education, and also how we can measure creativity to really assess whether we are making any progress by through this program. So Projectory is a product of all this research and thinking, and we found out when children are given certain type of environment where there's a lot of new type of materials that can be stimulating to them, and also they're encouraged to run their own project, etc. They learn certain things and they become more courageous. they become more willing to talk to strangers, and they are willing to do teamwork, work on the subject that really that's like passionate about, etc., which are the important traits of a creativity. And I think our the program has been designed to really strengthen those type of traits. So in the end, each child can become more creative. So that's a projectory as a space that we designed, and we have found a lot of a success, and we're working on kind of spreading it beyond the building that we built.
Hmm. It's pretty interesting to think about the idea that traditional school would be where you learn the commoditized information. I had never really thought of it like
Yeah.
that. It's pretty scary. And then when you call Projectory this third space, there's home, there's school, there's home, and then this place where you're learning creativity, and all of the skills you described are the really valuable skills that we're going to need. And so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because that eventually has to find its way back to school.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'd love to switch to, so we've talked a lot about, kids and education. I'd love to switch to work, because I found it interesting, in the same way that you dive into this word play, and what the word play means. In the work sense, we have this concept of work hard, play hard, and this idea that work and play are completely separate. And you challenge that notion in the book. So I'd love for you to go into that a little bit.
Yes, sure. I mean, I think I mean, I think we spend so much time at work, and people
Yeah.
often say, "Oh, I spend more time with my coworkers, and then sometimes my family in the day." Because I mean, I just kind of come home and kind of sleep. So I think it's yes. I mean, like we need some time to really focus on certain type of work and kind of dive in and solve problems, etc. I mean, that's not replaceable. But the rest of the work and is designed to really to create better collaborative environment, and like and find connections with others that can lead to more productive collaboration, and getting to know each other's strengths and weakness better. So and I think it's also, yeah, sometimes be really out of box and solve problems and creativity, etc. And all of that is very will require different type of concentration, different type of like a focus, and it doesn't all have to be the same. Sitting at the desk, or like doing the kind of this the same thing like repetitively. We have to step back and find ways to connect with others, and we found through the gaming and playing games and designing games, though they're a very interesting kind of a vocabulary that we can drive from game design, that's very effective at connecting people and driving the best out of our colleagues and our community. And I think there's no reason why we should not take that and deeply integrate in our and designing of our workplace. And I think they'll be very productive, and also will resonate really well with next generation of the employees who are very much well versed in this gaming vocabulary.
Hmm. Yeah, you and I've talked about this in the past, but I'd love for you to expand on just gaming generally leads a lot of technology adoption. And I hadn't really thought about even behaviorally, like if you're a game designer and you're thinking about, creating games where people are playing with other people, how that could actually be used as almost like a model or a template to magnify this kind of connectivity and curiosity between people at work, outside of games and other industries. Is that kind of the thinking there? Is modeling the company?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's there are. I mean, every game is different, and every game has a different like design component. But there are something pretty universal across games, like things like stats and things like kind of level up, things like kind
Mm,
of the clans and all those things. And then I think that that's because it's very close to our instinct, that that's how we think about collaborating with others, and let's think about how we think about experience, and that pushes you up to the next level, and be challenged, and take more responsibility and things like that. So there is a very strong parallel in what happens in the game, and those vocabulary is very much well understood. So I think it's from the management perspective, and that's kind of that's how we can communicate with other employees.
mm. I would love for you to talk about women in gaming. I would imagine from the very, very earliest days at NCSoft, we've always been, I've been in, the games business a long time too, and that it's pretty male dominated, which is an understatement. And I just would love to hear your perspective on women and how you have, kind of integrated a certain care that I feel that is kind of is a thread that runs through your career almost. And I loved in the book, by the way, reading about how you literally, I'd love to start with this story actually, how you literally asked for a seat at the table. I think it's an instructive little anecdote that a lot of women out there could hear. So I'd love for you to tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of my earliest memories that I grew up in South Korea, and the kind of Thanksgiving, which is Chuseok, is one of the largest, kind of most celebrated holiday in the fall. And in our case, our extended family got together at my oldest uncle's house, right? And oftentimes we go there like a day or two early, because it takes so much time to prepare all the food, including like dumplings and like all this like a meat, like all sorts of dishes that you can think of. And finally, when the dinner, like the dinner on that the full moon's day comes, you finally have that feast, you have that like a big dinner all together. But what I realized as a young girl, when I was early days, I think it was like a 6 or 7 years old, and I realized that all the uncles and my male cousins were sitting at this big table in the living room, because I mean there is not that there wasn't a big enough table, so like we kind of set out this big table that all those people can sit around and have the prepared food. And my female cousins and aunts who actually prepared for the food over the last couple of days were sitting in the kitchen,
Oh, oh.
and they were like eating the ugly dumplings that they popped, and they could not make it to the main table in the living room. And I was puzzled, and like, why should this be the case? And I didn't know, I cannot articulate why, but I wanted to sit next to my father in the living room. So I walked up to my father and I asked, "Can I sit next to you?" And I think my father was very supportive to like the daughters, so he let me sit there, and I was able to have like a bowl of like handsome dumpling instead of just dumpling. And I noticed that all my girl cousins thought that I was a weirdo, and I thought and thought that was like a kind of I'm not a really a good girl, like asking for such a things, which was out of my way. But I think that was a moment that gave me some kind of confidence that I can ask for it, and I don't have to be fit in the mold, and I don't have to feel like kind of helpless in doing what I want to do. And it was one of the pivotal moments for me.
I wanted to know a little bit more when I was reading it. Did the men around the table push back on it? Did they act shocked? Was your dad surprised? What was the reaction?
I was such a young girl, so I don't think they kind of cared so much. But I think they and certainly they thought that like she was different, and then she's like she's not one of the girls that that they were used to.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah, so that there's a related concept which I wanted to talk about, and so we'll kind of weave these together. But we definitely want to talk about the future of AI, and we want to talk about embedded ethics because you've written a lot about this, and you've written a lot about biases and imparting our own biases to the machine. A lot of some of these biases are around gender. So I would just love for you to just dive into that topic wherever you think it's most important because there's so much to unpack here.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also at that moment was when I was talking about game design, and I realized in gaming there are so many. I think it's like many years ago, right? I mean, it's like over a decade ago that still in games, most of the heroes were like a male character, like a male, right? The male characters were like the heroes, and like they were the strongest and in a game, and there are not many female heroes, and I think it's all the female characters had like impossible physique and like carrying this massive weapon that's that's just improportional like it's just disproportional to what they look like. So I thought, oh, yeah, this is not something that it is not the type of world that I would like to portray. So I went to the game designers and said, let's create a world where we have a kind of equal number of male heroes and female heroes. And I thought that was going to be a very easy conversation.
It's
Then
logical, right?
yeah, right. But then, to my surprise, I was faced with a very strong pushback, and the question
Mm,
was like, it's not like they're not going to do it, but it was more like, why? Why is it better to have equal representation? Why is it better to have more female heroes? And especially when it seems like there is no problem, it's what the customers want, etc.
mm,
So that really struck me as a surprise and made me think about like what is really better, and what do I feel that like what why do I feel compelled that I'd like to do something different from status quo. And it led me to think realize the kind of the responsibility as a game designer. Game is in a sense is kind of a media, and like what you say in the media and what you portray has such a profound impact on those to the audience. So that was one thing, and the other was that I mean, in making this decisions, like how many female heroes and male heroes, how we want the heroes look like in our game, etc. There is no like right or wrong answer, so we cannot really say this is a manual of a game design and this is what a heroes should look like. It's something that evolves over time, and it's but it should be in the realm of the designers, kind of the freedom of the creativity, but their thinking and their judgment and their decision making goes into this design. So I realized what's more important at that point was, instead of saying this is a right or this is wrong, but the way kind of the framework of thinking about these issues and framework of thinking about this responsibility. And that got me to be interested in embedded ethics, because embedded ethics is something that doesn't teach you what's right or wrong, but it's something that teaches everyone who is taking CS classes and algorithm classes, or like how to make like a machine learning programming. They teach them to think about stakeholders, like who are the stakeholders who are going to be affected by the program that I'm writing and the system I'm developing, and what type of considerations should go into it to make sure that there is no unintended consequences, or like amplifying biases and prejudice through this.
that makes a lot of sense. So, these problems are really human first in terms of programming or embedding biases basically into the machine. Do you see any good examples of how this is is going to be prevented going forward, or who do you see, or how would you advise companies to make sure that this doesn't, go down the wrong path? Because clearly this is something that a lot of people are thinking about, and we've had some pretty extreme examples out there, but it feels like, I don't know if it's too, is it early enough that we can kind of get AI on the right path on this point, or is the horse out of the barn?
I mean, I'm optimistic and hopeful that there is much we can do, but I think it's what I think what's important is for us to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very important first step. There are a lot of things that are not comfortable for people to bring up and to talk about and take it for granted, but surprisingly, it's like not everyone think alike, and it's very different. So I think it's very important to think about what is the world that we'd like to build, because that has a profound impact on the way we choose what type of data that we choose to train this AI, and what kind of underlying prejudice and biases that the system is going to have. I mean, one of the famous research related with AI in like back in 2017 and 16 was that it was found by the founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, and she found out that this facial recognition algorithm available back then had a strong bias against colored women. So, like, while it had pretty high accuracy of categorizing like a white male to like a human face, but it had like a substantially more error rate in categorizing colored women. And it's not necessarily because like the like kind of programmers are, or like the people who wrote algorithm are like has some kind of bias against a certain group of people. It's more because the data that we as a humanity has produced up to that point, it was biased. I think it's many years ago, if you search for like a CEO of like like a kind of keyword CEO, and then go to the image tab, most of the images that shows up was like a white male, because that was a word that was the case. And then I think it's still probably the case, like we don't have kind of the more like balanced, like, equal representation. And I think that's the kind of data that AI learns to kind of think like what like a CEO should look like. And even if that's not our intention, because that's the data available, what is what we have created, it's inevitable to have that type of like imbalanced representation. And oftentimes the people ask me like, oh yeah, that's the world we're living in, and that's the data that's available. Like, do you expect for AI to be better than humans? And I'm not saying that, and that goes back to my quest for like that I had spent so much time thinking about what is right, what is better, what is like wrong, etc. It's not like better, worse, or like good or bad, but like is I mean it is very evident if we just train our AI system with that data, that AI and system is gonna be a conduit amplifying any bias, any misrepresentation, amplified and kind of stuck in like in what we do for a very long time in a very very sticky way.
Hmm.
And question I want to ask is, this the world that we'd like to build? Or
Hmm.
do we want to have a conversation about, like, even though that's what we have done over the last many hundred years, but now we know better. Now we have an opportunity to reflect upon what we have done and unintended harms and consequences. Don't we want to think about something different? And I think that's why it's important for us to have that type of conversation, and more than ever among ourselves, like kind of what is the kind of the world that we'd like to support and build and going forward, and how we would like to think about it. So I think that those are the kind of I know this is not an easy conversation, but I think it's what's urgent for us to is to talk about it and get to some level of consensus.
The amplification point is huge. I never really thought about that. The fact that, all AI has to work with is what happened. And theoretically, we've learned more up until now, and we want to do better in the future, but it can only amplify the past unless we almost kind of redirect. That's super interesting. I mean, I think it's
Transfer.
really,
Yeah, right. Yeah, has
it's
to be.
kudos to you and your culture that you had. I think it'd be unusual in a lot of cultures to have kind of the senior leader say, we're going to do a game with 50-50 male female heroes, and to have people say, why would we do that? This is already working. But it is kudos to, it sounds like, the culture, and I think that is an area where we like to lean into is culture, because I think that without that kind of a culture or open talking about these issues, talking about these biases, and having an open space to do that, I think it's going to be hard to progress. So kudos to you. So I'd love for you to wrap this up. Songyee, everybody buy the book, push play, Gaming for a Better World. And also, let me see if you can see it in the video. Yep. And also, Songyee, I'd love for you to just close us out with any parting thoughts. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela, for having me, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I think that I'm really glad that that I'm able to share this thought through the book with the larger audience. And I think from my experience, we talked about how gaming has been leading technology adoption and innovation, in addition to like a lot of culture and how we interact and how we work with others. And in conclusion, gaming is almost like, to me, has been lens into the future, like making games, playing games. It kind of gave me a lot of insight and a hint and like what's going to happen in other industries and what are the kind of technologies that's more exciting. It's in the pipeline that can also have a very transformative effect in other areas as well. So with that perspective, I think I hope more people enjoy reading and having an opportunity to think about game in a slightly different angle.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Yoon, and we hope you could join us again next time.
Thank you.